the beginning when we were planning, we decided that the most important thing was to decide a location. After drawing up a load of bullet points, we had agreed on either Fargo Village, Cathedral Ruins, or the ice skating rink. However, the ice skating rink did not get back to us on email. We had emailed them to check that it was okay with it being a place that you have to pay to enter. We did have a look up Fargo, but that was a no-go. And Cathedral was the same because they were both very empty. It was early morning, there wasn't many people about. We then had a further discussion on where else we should go. We decided IKEA because it was lunchtime, so we thought the canteen would be best to go to, and we could fit in quite well there, sat at the table, having a look around, observing. It was in a familiar place to the majority of us, so that was our idea on location. We then went on to do our observation for half an hour. We immersed ourselves the best we could. We wasn't able to actually communicate with anybody. We were sat on a table, integrated, with everyone else kind of sat around at their tables, so we could look around discreetly without them actually knowing we were watching them. We divided the observation topics of what was to be observed between us, and we all had 2 or 3 points each to look at so that it wasn't too much to keep jotting down. And then when we came back, we didn't come back with all the same information. We were able to discuss our findings and put it together to create an evaluation on what we've learned and what we've observed.
Style special culture. So obviously the people in the business do something just really smart and thinking very sophisticated, which kind of suggested that they were more important than everyone else around.
From my findings, I found that people that went to IKEA went there to socialise and to talk about their problems and their issues, as well as just to have a little catch-up session and just to communicate with others without using their phones.
There's lots of people being socialized with others even they're during lunchtime, and there are lots of people eating with their phone and sometimes reading the newspaper. And there's others come here, not have a lunch, but just have a rest. Yeah.
So from this experience, I learned that ethnographic research is harder than I imagined. There's so much research and observation, and observing people and everything they're doing is actually pretty hard and a lot to take in, but it was good.
My findings in the observation were that people act quite systematically, and I found this to be quite like ants, that they all had their place, they knew what they were doing, they were very organised, and these people didn't know each other, but they all kind of followed suit. They went round, they got their food, they paid for their food, they got their own drinks, they found a table, and that people worked quite well in that kind of atmosphere.
For this task as a group, we found 2 contrasting news reports of the same controversial 2016 event, which we would then conduct discourse analysis on. There is no single definition for discourse analysis, as it is a term used to discuss a variety of different methods to approach a text. However, all approaches reject the realist idea that language is simply a neutral means of reflecting and describing our world, but rather that discourse is of essential importance to constructing social life. For the task, we decided to focus on driverless cars, choosing a BBC News video and contrasting it to the written article in the Daily Mail. Therefore, making not only the content discussed a contrast, but also the context of the information.
Because for discourse, obviously the article is probably phrased quite formal, isn't it?
Yeah.
So like even on a formal article you have this like contrast, because this is also quite formal, so we can say these are similar, however the comments show that nice little difference.
Yes, that's the one. I'll definitely let me say this page.
After deciding on the text, we had to transcribe the BBC video, which ended up being harder than we originally imagined, and in the end it took a few attempts to make the transcript follow the video perfectly. This was important because we had to make the familiar strange, therefore focusing on the organisation, construction and function and meaning of what is being said.
You talk really fast on video, I'm that way. Oh, look at this.
Once we were completely familiar with the text, the next stage was to code the transcripts. We chose categories to focus on, such as safety and reliance on technology, before going through the text and highlighting the areas that we believed were relevant to each category. It was through coding that we were able to form a hypothesis for the basis of our write-up.
C2. Starts from C2.
C2T. So it's actually aimed at the people who would not be able to afford it.
Yeah, pretty much. Whereas the other one is a BBC related.
Well, public service broadcaster means that there should be aimed at everyone.
It is, but if you look at it closely, it's more aimed to C2, C1.
That's
I found out this research was limited in the sense that with ethnography we could look at different factors such as the behaviour, the lighting, the sound and so on, but with discourse analysis it was kind of tricky in the sense that we could only look at 3 different categories like the rhetorical questions, the context, so it made it kind of hard in the sense that we couldn't find as much in-depth information, whereas in the previous task we could.
We just found some comments through the public, and their comments may be influenced by others and then follow them whatever others say, and yeah, it's quite limited.
I thought the discourse analysis was quite a fun way of doing research, however it was also quite limited because we chose to do it on driverless cars and we're a group of girls who aren't particularly interested or know that much about cars, and we have quite a similar background, which meant that our readings of the texts and the videos were quite similar. So because we didn't have an outside viewpoint, it probably really limited our overall findings and overall opinion about both things. So it would have been better if maybe we had a wider group of people, maybe people who knew about cars more, to make it more interesting and a better form of research.
This week's weekly task was based on space. One of the topics we decided to look at was the LGBT community, mainly focusing on the transgender community. We found that in Jamaica and India, as well as other third world countries, individuals that were from the transgender community were not accepted in their society, unlike in the western part of the world. For example, in Jamaica, a 16-year-old male was brutally murdered due to the fact he was dressed in a dress. We looked more in depth into the story. We found that their culture deemed the LGBT community as morally wrong. Due to their beliefs as a Christian nation, they were portrayed as homophobic, unlike the Western society, as they are aware of the transgender society through the use of social media and the celebrity pop culture. There are 2 types of space. There is virtual space and there is real space. We decided that we would focus on virtual space as it allowed us to look at different media platforms such as YouTube, the radio, TV shows and magazines. We found that virtual space and real space had a correlation in the sense they are a part of our surroundings and our social relations. The virtual world has created new possibilities and a design process in which we can create new reality as a part of Bowman-Catter's gratification theory of escapism. By focusing on the LGBT community, we were able to focus on project identity aspect of space. Project identity is a part of Edward Sodger's third space theory, of which he believes that third space is always expanding. Our planning process consisted of us looking at different articles from different websites, as well as looking at magazines and finding clips from YouTube. This helped us identify whether we wanted to look at two sides of the spectrum. For example, looking at ideologies that a third world country has, as well as a first world country, so we could identify if there were any similarities between the two cultures. And through our research, we found there were a few similarities between India and Jamaica, as well as a few American countries that do not believe in the legalization of same-sex marriages, as well as accepting the LGBT community. Our main focus points were taken from two different articles, one about a young man who was killed in Jamaica, and the other articles were looking at it from a celebrity's point of view. For example, we looked at Laverne Cox, one of the stars of Orange is the New Black, who is a transgender female. As well as this, we looked at Caitlyn Jenner and her transition from being an American superstar to being a now refound version of herself.
So I thought this was quite an interesting type of research to do, because there's like loads that we could find out about it, because we decided to do on transgender. But it wasn't, in my opinion, the best type of research we've done so far, as it was just all secondary. You were just constantly looking online for like different people's opinions, who said what, the history of it all, and it just wasn't as interesting to conduct as ethnography or discourse analysis, where you are there putting your own opinion and like viewing things in different ways and considering how that could be taken.
This topic was about space, and I found it easier in the sense that we could look at certain specific representations, like the places, the people, and also how social media can affect space. And there's different types of identities that we could have looked into, like legitimacy and reactive, as well as project space, which helped our research in terms of looking at different aspects.
I found that globalization gives people more way to see the world and give them different attitude to see something like transgender. And people concern more about how public think about their identity. So some of the people who transgendered just choose suicide. And yeah.
This week, we focus on researching people. As a main approach, interviewing is among the most central methods in social science research. We choose how do people make sense of friendship in the age of social media as our main topic. The method we used was focus group, as we would prefer more of a discussion between what the different opinions around the subject are, hoping their opinions would bounce off each other. There are identifiable characteristics that distinguish good interviews from outstanding ones. Our target group is student, and we choose a location that was private. Then we choose 6 specific topic guides before discussing expanded questions for each section. A great interviewing seems difficult, partly because it is an acquired ability that takes time to develop, partly because people often remain bound to conventional normal of behavior, while interviewing that precludes open access to the people interviewed. This script promotes for the interviewer to collect informed consent and promotes to remind the interviewer the information that she is interested in collecting. Interview postcards become not only a set of questions, but also procedural guide for directing a new qualitative researcher through the interview process.
In the process of interview, we found it's quite hard to find a specific group since we did interview individually. On one hand, we have more choice to choose interviewees. On the other hand, it could make our interviewees feel comfortable. Sometimes we place innocent when we want our interviewees talk more. When we conducting the interview, we made sure to converse and listen to what was said, as this followed us to find out what the interviewee saw as important. We also create separate questions depending on what the interviewee said, allowing us to collect more deep information. But we still use the script to make sure we concentrate on our main topic. It was also important to allow the interviewee to speak more than us, giving them space to open up. After we had conducted the interview, we meet up as a group to discuss all of our findings and compare the answers.
This week's task was one of the most complicated ones we've done so far, because originally we were going to do a focus group, getting a group of people together that we didn't know them, they didn't know each other, to get them to talk about our question. However, the practicalities of that were way more difficult than we imagined, which meant we had to change our original plan and we ended up doing individual interviews. I feel like this worked quite well because it gave us a chance all to shine, be the interviewer, take control of the situation we were in and try out the skills that we've been learning about. But at the same time, being an interviewer is really hard. You had this great structure of all the questions we wanted to ask, but as you're going through, depending on what the interviewee says, you have to change those questions, you have to create sub-questions. If things they said have been covered, you have to make sure to cut them. But however, we were filming the interviews, so that meant that we didn't have to be constantly making notes, which probably made that aspect a lot easier, because just trying to keep on top of what they were saying, link to the next idea, what could you change it to, was way more than I expected it to be work-wise, and adding and writing notes would be really difficult. Yeah, it was a very good way, I guess, of collecting research, because you got a lot of in-depth personal answers that I feel we hadn't previously achieved from any of our other types of research. But it's so complicated and so time-consuming that you'd have to really need to know a lot about the subject to do the interview method, I'd say, because it does take up so much of your time.
For this week's weekly task, we decided that it would be best to conduct one-on-one interviews. We decided to follow a unstructured interview style, as it allowed us to ask more in-depth questions. However, it was structured in the sense that we had questions formulated, but we were able to ask further in-depth questions from what the participants had said, which allowed us to gain more information throughout our analysis.
This week we were doing researching people, and the method we used was focus group. We choose a topic like how the people make sense of friendship under the influence of social media. I thought it's a quite easy topic for students, but during the process of the task, we found it's hard to find a specific group for the interview. So we do the interview individually, and when I do the interview, I found is if I want to make my interviewee talk more, I need to follow what they said and change my question a little bit, thus they can talk more the positive, the negative. Yeah.
For this week's task, we had to produce a photo essay which interpreted or analysed the situation. A photo essay is a series of photos which are put together with text to interpret a social situational problem. It is not actually a research method, but instead a way to convey the findings of research to the audience, put together in a way that demonstrates what the findings are showing. For our photo essay, we decided to explore buildings and structures, specifically the Coventry Cathedral, through a comparison of the cathedral ruins and the modern cathedral. This is because the structures have a huge meaning behind them, as well as being an interesting visual contrast for the basis of the photo essay. In our planning session, we looked at the images of the cathedral after the Blitz, finding out the historical information of what happened. Next, we looked into the meaning of the new cathedral, helping us to discover the important links between the two cathedrals. There were multiple things we had to consider when conducting the photo essay. Therefore, we created a list of questions to ask ourselves when doing the research. These questions helped us to decide which photographs we should take, and also reminded us to think of the final photo essay and what we were aiming to produce and the information we were wanting to convey. Once we had taken all of the photos, we decided to pick out the ones which worked to create the best comparison between the new and old cathedral, for example exploring the stained glass windows. These images helped to illustrate all of our points in our final photo essay, as people who had never visited the cathedral could easily see and understand what we were discussing.
So for the photo essay, I thought it was a lot easier to conduct the research. It was a lot more interesting to compile a load of pictures together. It's a lot more visual rather than having to gather little bits of research here and there. You could go out and actually explore the place a bit more in depth and take photos of the actual moment in hand. I think it was easier than previous research that we've done, and although it's not an in-depth research so much as ethnography when you're actually in a situation, it is an efficient kind of research.
For this week, our task is about a video essay, and our group wants to analyze the culture in Coventry. So we went to the cathedral, and we want to make a comparison between the old cathedral and the new cathedral. And we found the old cathedral was destroyed in the Second World War, and the new cathedral gathered a lot of new idea for the designer, and really took photos which I think about which view is better and which view could represent the culture. So I think the video essay is quite helpful for us to analyze.
I found this a very interesting way of doing research. I think it's been my favourite type so far because you got to be really fun and creative with it. So in the process I took most of the final photos, and I really enjoy taking photos. I found it really fun to be involved with, and I also think it's a type of research where you can really get your audience involved, being able to show them photos and then having the ability to write up about them and they can see what you're talking about. I think makes it a lot more engaging and just much more fun. Definitely my favourite type of research so far, but I don't think from it we gained as much information as some other types of research, because we did do some secondary research at the beginning about looking at the site, what happened, the new cathedral, and how the structures that changed being rebuilt, but I think it wasn't as in-depth as some types of research.
This week's task required us to research our own experiences of how we engage with digital media. To achieve this, we needed to draw on our knowledge of other research methods we have already explored. There is no set definition of the digital, but it allows the expansion of our understanding of technology. Digital research is of huge importance, as the physical routes and traces we make through the world are often accompanied by digital traces. Digital research methods are still in the making and therefore will develop further in the future. However, right now it is a social phenomenon which can be used as an innovative methodological practice, and the resources available are massive. The main aim of our research was to explore digital media usage among media and communication students. There are multiple ways we could have acquired this data, such as WhatsApp focus groups, Skype interviews, forums, or online questionnaires. However, we decided to use visual diaries, better known as vlogging. By getting participants to create a vlog, it helped to create a people-centered account, which gave them the power to be in control of what they told us. Also, the sense of privacy often encourages people to open up more than, say, in a group chat. The videos allowed us to also see and understand their facial expressions and body language. As we were focusing on media and communication students, they would not require any skilling up, as we were asking them to just utilise the skills they already had, therefore making it a practical method of research as well as being an in-depth method. We contacted all the participants online, asking if they would be willing to participate and making sure they completely understood what was expected from them and also what their answers would be used for.
So, social media, which I use a lot. I mainly use Twitter most of the time today on like multiple platforms. Like I use my phone, I use it on my laptop, use it on my iPad because I have a problem. I stalk a lot of people.
I tend to use digital media like I said, every day, but in terms of like how frequently I use it, I'd say I most probably use it throughout the day for about 4 to 5 hours, which sounds quite bad actually.
The main media platforms that I use are Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. I tend to use YouTube a lot, like just to catch up on like people's vlogging and things like that.
I currently own 2 laptops. I technically a desktop screen, an Xbox, a few Nintendo gadgets, a phone, tablet, Kindle, MP3. I think that's it.
And I have to find a line to come to Villa Park. So I have to use Google Map. That means I always use this map. You can find any way to come to your destination.
So talking about social media use, I use almost every type of social network platform and I check them multiple times every day without fail. Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Goodwall, which is a school one, like literally anything that can be checked, I will.
In my study, I cannot work without computer because there are a lot of software in it, such as Photoshop and Premiere.
The social media application I always use is WeChat because WeChat is very easy to use it and it's very popular in China.
Just in general, like to check up on news because obviously it's a good platform to see different types of news around the world, and you can do the same for Snapchat as well, I guess. Like I use on the news part of Snapchat, there's like BuzzFeed, there's different magazine parts.
The platform that I use the most is actually Facebook and Messenger because it connects me with all my friends. As I'm a student from Bulgaria living and studying in Coventry.
We decided to ask media and communication students not just from Coventry University but also other universities in the UK and abroad to give us a greater understanding of the different opinions students had about digital media. After we received all of the vlogs, we went through them, transcribing what they said, which allowed us to then code the text to draw out the similarities and differences between the vlogs. We then used this data to draw overall conclusions around social media, technology and the amount of time the participants spend using digital media in its multiple forms. This type of research has actually been really good. We asked people to record vlogs of themselves, which helped them to open up, and going through them was actually really interesting. By not having a set question, it meant that we were just there exploring like what were they going to discuss and how would it actually link together. And the fact that we could draw similarities of most people stating that they spend over 8 hours on social media a day just showed that everyone's actually pretty similar in the realms of using digital media amongst media communication students. It would have been interesting to maybe branch out more, to maybe get more people involved, but we actually got vlogs from 10 different people in the end, and it was just so interesting, and it would help a good mix of discourse analysis and the interviewing method, but a lot more personal.
We were doing research in the digital this week, and for our group, we focus on how our classmates use social media, digital media, and we ask our classmates to film themselves and describe the main ways to use digital media. Through the videos I found as a media and communication student, we use digital media quite often, like Facebook, like Twitter. We connect with each other and get involved in our Facebook group. It's quite helpful for our study. And in other way, we use Photoshop and Premiere to editing. Yeah, it's quite helpful for us for our major.
I really enjoyed doing this week's weekly task, partly because we're able to ask our fellow peers about their use of digital media, as well as this. I kind of found that there were so many similarities, in the sense like the people that I interviewed, they said that they mainly use Facebook now more than they ever did through using their phone or tablets and stuff like that, just to the fact that we have a social platform where as a media and communication students we talk, and I find it very interesting that everyone kind of says similar things.